So in the piece that I published last night on the budget, I called it For Extraordinary Times, and I said, extraordinarily, the RBA cut rates on the same day as the Treasurer provided a budget for increasing private sector employment. This is a rare example of monetary and fiscal policy directed towards the same objective at the same time. And I mean that. I've rarely seen over a lot of time of looking at both how monetary policy works and fiscal policy works, that they ever operate together in exactly this way. And I think it's a really good sign for where the Australian economy is going in the next year. With a rate cut, of course, we've been forecasting this rate cut for some months. And the reason we thought there would be a rate cut is that we've had very low wages growth. Average weekly earnings, the most recently published average weekly earnings growth is the lowest this century. And we thought that that would generate a low core inflation number. And indeed, when the core inflation number was published, it was the lowest this century. The trimmed mean came in at 1.7% year on year. And that's 80 basis points below the RBA target. The RBA targets inflation between 2 and 3%, which means 2.5%. And if you're 80 basis points below that target, then you've got certainly room to cut rates by 25 basis points and probably more. So the RBA cut rates by 25 basis points. But the problem there is what that does is that just if I run my model of short rates, and I did yesterday, all that does is compensate for the decline in year-on-year core inflation. But the problem is the quarterly inflation rate was only 0.2. So 0.2 is 0.8% annualized. If that inflation number doesn't get up from that level, we are going to go into a disinflation cycle in the Australian economy. And that's going to require a lot more rate cuts. I said that, a lot more rate cuts. Okay? Now, if that inflation number picks up on a quarterly basis in the next CPI, then we might be able to get away with only, say, one more rate cut. But if it doesn't, we will have several more rate cuts. I just flagged that right now. Now, when we get to the budget, one of the great, what I said in the piece that I published last night, that it's rare. I've seen a lot of budget presentations. It's rare to see a treasurer who actually understands how the economy works. And how the economy works in real life is companies make profits, they invest those profits, and that investment creates jobs. Now, if you increase taxes on those profits, what you do is you reduce the amount of money that's available for investment, and therefore you reduce jobs growth. But if you cut taxes on those profits, as happens in this budget, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses, then you allow more investment, which creates more jobs growth. And that is exactly what's happening in this budget, and it is a spectacular and incredibly unusual example among politicians of the operation of intelligence. So what you see is that, and it's important to note, as is noted in the budget, that the greatest sector of employment creation is in small to medium business. So the rate cuts start with small business and work their way up year by year to medium business, and eventually in 10 years' time, assuming the government is still in office, it works up to a rate cut, a company tax rate of 27.5% for big business. Now, of course, the left are railing against this cut to company tax, or prospective company tax in 10 years' time, and where in 10 years' time we will have a company tax rate of 27.5%, where Singapore and Hong Kong already have company tax rates of 15%. and Britain is looking at a company tax rate in the same period of 17%, apparently. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'll just go on like that. Now, the other interesting thing in the document is where public spending is going. What's really interesting to me is that the spending side is really only a fraction of 1% of GDP lower than it was at the peak level in 2009 and 2010 during the emergency of the GFC, when we had to increase public spending to restabilise the economy. You remember how Kevin saved the world back then. And so the problem about increasing spending is it's really, really hard to take it down again. And here we are all these years later, and public spending as a percentage of GDP is still within a fraction of the same level than it was in the GFC. The austerity ferry never came to Australia. And in that situation of this continuously high level of spending relative to GDP, it is only by gradual, year by year, struggles of receipts, rising receipts in the situation of a difficult world economy, that there is any closing of the budget deficit. And it does eventually close, well, it gets close to closing sometime around about the end of this decade. Yeah, I hope it happens in real life. When we look at the outlays, again, what we saw last night is the complaints from Social Security, where pressure groups that there wasn't enough spending. But when you look at the outlays in the document that I wrote, it is not just that Social Security is by far and away the biggest section of the budget at some 35% of spending, 150 billion some dollars, but it's the fastest growing sector of the budget in terms of total outlays. I would that I could complain about having that kind of money thrown at me or anything else I wanted to do. But it is interesting that the government is providing some increases in the transport infrastructure area, and from a relatively low base, and I think that's really commendable. And I'll try and investigate what's actually happening in that further, because I think it's really important. So, in short, as I say in the piece, you've got a rare event. We've actually got the operation of in this budget of intelligence and politics. I hope I see it again sometime. Thank you.